If you think Disney makes money from movies, you're analyzing the wrong business. The films are the most visible part of the company, but visibility is not the same as leverage. Behind every movie release sits a much larger system designed to multiply the value of a single story across the global economy. Across much of Disney's history, the company's theme parks and consumer products divisions generated far more profit than the films that introduced the characters. The movies create the stories people remember, but the real economic engine appears after the credits roll. The real question is not how Disney makes films. The real question is how one story can become a theme park attraction, a streaming franchise, a toy line, and a global licensing machine all at once. Once you understand that system, Disney begins to look less like a movie studio and more like an intellectual property engine. To understand how that engine formed, you have to go back to the beginning of the company. In the 1920s, Walt Disney was experimenting with animation at a time when the medium barely existed. Early cartoons were short, simple, and often disposable entertainment. But Disney believed something different. He believed animated characters could become emotional experiences that audiences would remember long after the film ended. That insight changed how the studio approached storytelling. But the architecture Disney built around storytelling would eventually become the foundation of one of the most powerful intellectual property systems ever created. In 1937, Disney released Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first full-length animated feature film. The success of that film demonstrated something new. Animated stories could attract massive audiences and generate enormous cultural attention. But Disney noticed something even more interesting. When audiences loved a character, they wanted more than just the film. They wanted toys, books, clothing, and experiences connected to the story. This is where the system begins to change. Instead of treating movies as the final product, Disney began treating them as the starting point. A successful story could become the seed for an entire ecosystem of products and experiences. The visible business was film production. The hidden advantage was intellectual property. Over time, Disney refined that system into what many analysts call the IP flywheel. A film introduces characters and stories to a global audience. If those characters resonate, Disney can extend them into new formats and markets. A movie becomes merchandise. Merchandise reinforces the characters. Theme park attractions transform the story into a physical experience. Each layer strengthens the others. Pause and consider what that means structurally. A single story can become a film, a toy line, a theme park attraction, a streaming series, and a global licensing network. Most studios release movies. Disney releases intellectual property designed to power an entire economic ecosystem. This is why Disney's business does not operate like a traditional movie studio. Most studios rely on box office revenue and hope the next film performs well. Disney builds assets designed to generate value across decades. When a story becomes culturally dominant, the film is only the beginning. It moves into streaming platforms, consumer products, theme parks, and licensing agreements across the world. One story can produce revenue streams for generations. That structural advantage becomes even more powerful when Disney controls distribution channels as well. With the launch of Disney+, the company gained a direct relationship with hundreds of millions of viewers globally. Streaming platforms allow Disney to continuously expose audiences to its library of characters and franchises. Each viewing reinforces brand familiarity and keeps those characters relevant across generations. But here is where the system begins to compound. If a film succeeds, merchandise sales increase. If merchandise sales increase, characters become more recognizable. If characters become more recognizable, new films and series attract larger audiences. And if audiences grow, the entire ecosystem expands again. Pause and consider that feedback loop for a moment. Disney is not just producing entertainment. It is operating one of the most powerful intellectual property flywheels in the global media industry. But the system becomes even more powerful when physical experiences enter the equation. Theme parks transform stories into environments people can physically enter. Visitors are not just watching characters anymore. They are walking through the worlds those characters inhabit. That transformation creates a completely different type of engagement. A film may last 2 hours, a theme park visit can last an entire day, and the memory can last a lifetime. That experience reinforces emotional attachment to the characters, which strengthens demand for everything connected to the story. But here's an important question. What happens when one company controls the stories, the distribution channels, the merchandise, and the physical experiences all at once? The answer is structural leverage. Few entertainment companies possess the scale required to build that type of integrated system. Producing films requires creative talent and massive budgets. Operating theme parks requires global infrastructure and decades of investment. Licensing consumer products requires worldwide retail relationships and supply chains. Each layer of the system becomes difficult for competitors to replicate. That difficulty creates barriers to entry. A new studio may produce a successful film, but transforming that film into a global merchandise ecosystem, theme park attraction, and long-term franchise requires capabilities most companies simply do not possess. This is why Disney invests heavily in acquiring intellectual property from other studios. When Disney purchased Marvel, Pixar, and Lucasfilm, it was not simply buying film studios. It was acquiring entire universes of characters capable of feeding the IP flywheel for decades. Marvel films lead to merchandise, streaming series, and theme park attractions. Star Wars becomes a global licensing empire spanning toys, games, books, and immersive theme park environments. The stories become assets. But the real transformation appears when you zoom out and examine the entire system together. Films generate attention. Characters generate emotional attachment. Merchandise generates daily visibility. Theme parks generate physical experiences. Streaming platforms maintain cultural relevance between releases. Each component reinforces the others. That interconnection creates the flywheel. If a franchise grows popular, merchandise expands. If merchandise expands, brand recognition increases. If brand recognition increases, new films attract larger audiences. And if audiences grow larger, the entire ecosystem expands again. This escalation ladder explains how Disney compounds the value of its intellectual property over time. The company is not simply producing entertainment products. It is building cultural assets designed to generate value across multiple industries simultaneously. So the next time you see a Disney film release, it may look like a single entertainment product. But behind that release sits a system designed to multiply the value of that story across the global economy. Most people analyze the movies. Sophisticated observers analyze the intellectual property system behind them. Because in the modern entertainment economy, the companies with the most power are rarely the ones producing content. They are the ones controlling the characters, stories, and worlds that audiences return to again and again. And that is why Disney's real business was never just movies. It was the intellectual property flywheel behind them.